Imagine flying over the Libyan Sahara in the height of summer. Below, nothing. Only sand, rock, and a heat that distorts the horizon. There are no rivers, no lakes, no signs of life. The temperature exceeds 50 degrees on the surface. It is one of the most inhospitable places on the planet. Now imagine that same place 2,000 years ago was a network of walled cities, cultivated fields, cemeteries, and underground canals stretching over 750 kilometers. That tens of thousands of people lived there, that they had their own writing, armies, temples with colonnades, and funerary pyramids, that they were the first known urban civilization born in a desert, without any river, without rain, and that no one knew it because it was all buried beneath the sand. Until the satellites arrived. Leave your like, subscribe, and share. Let's begin. The name of this people was the Garamantes, and for centuries historians described them as what the Romans said of them: barbarian nomads, desert raiders, primitive peoples who roamed the southern borders of the Roman Empire causing trouble. The Greek historian Herodotus mentioned them in the 5th century before Christ as chariot hunters who pursued Ethiopian peoples through the desert. Pliny the Elder and other Roman authors portrayed them as savage warriors without stable civilization. For 2,000 years, that was the official view. The Garamantes were no more than a footnote in the history of North Africa. What the satellites revealed in the 21st century changed everything absolutely. In 2011, Professor David Mattingly, archaeologist at the University of Leicester, published the results of a project that would spend years changing the history of African archaeology. His team had analyzed high-resolution satellite images, including aerial photographs taken during the 1950s and 1960s, and had overlaid them with modern data from commercial satellites originally used by the oil industry to map the Libyan subsoil. What appeared on screen left the entire team speechless. In the Fezzan region, in southwestern Libya, about 1,000 kilometers south of Tripoli, the satellites had revealed more than 100 fortified settlements. Cities, villages, forts, cemeteries, cultivated fields. All of this in an area where today practically no one lives because conditions are too extreme. The discovery was possible in part because the regime of Muammar Gaddafi had kept archaeological access to the interior of Libya closed for decades. Gaddafi had no interest in the study of the pre-Islamic past of his country, and the archaeology of the period before the Arab conquest was practically paralyzed. When the regime fell in 2011, researchers were able for the first time to combine fieldwork with the massive analysis of satellite images. The result was a completely new picture of what had existed in that part of the Sahara during the first millennium of our era. The European Research Council funded the project with more than $3,500,000. What they found justified every cent. The satellite images showed something no one expected to see in that environment: urban density. In an area of barely 4 square kilometers, the researchers identified at least 10 settlements the size of a village. The structures were of adobe mud brick walls that in some places still stood 3 or 4 meters high, despite centuries of wind erosion. The walls were straight with precise angles. The complexes had internal courtyards, differentiated rooms, structures that had clearly served as storehouses, workshops, or public meeting spaces. They were not nomadic camps. They were planned cities. The archaeologist Martin Sterry of Leicester, who led much of the image analysis, was direct. In that inhospitable landscape of zero rainfall, there was an exceptional density of construction for any ancient society. The capital of the Garamantes was called Garama. Today it is known as Jarma, a small locality in southern Libya. When archaeologists excavated its remains in the 1960s, they assumed it was a minor city. The dimensions were modest by classical standards, and the area was too remote to attract major archaeological projects during the 20th century. But the satellite analysis and subsequent hydrological studies revealed that Garama had had a population of around 4,000 people at its peak, with another 6,000 living in the surrounding villages of the Wadi al-Ajal Valley. For a city in the heart of the Sahara, that was something extraordinary. Its buildings included stone houses for the elites, adobe constructions for the common people, a temple with a columned portico, a Roman-style bath, and thousands of pyramidal tombs that still dot the landscape. But the most urgent question was always the same. How did they survive? The Libyan Sahara receives practically no rain. In some years, not a single drop falls. There are no permanent rivers. There are no lakes. The answer that the satellites and archaeologists unearthed together is one of the most astonishing engineering works of antiquity, the fogaras. A fogara is a horizontal underground tunnel, built with a very slight incline, that pierces the bedrock or sand until it reaches the water table of a fossil aquifer. The water, driven solely by gravity, travels through the tunnel and emerges at the surface kilometers away, where it can be used to irrigate fields. It requires no pumps, no engines, no energy source other than the physics of water flowing downhill. Archaeologists have identified more than 750 kilometers of fogaras in the Fezzan region, more than 500 individual tunnels, some of up to 6.5 kilometers in length, dug through sand, gravel, and solid sandstone rock. Each tunnel had vertical access shafts every 10 meters or so for ventilation and maintenance, with a depth that in some cases reached 40 meters below the surface. The channels measured less than 60 centimeters wide and barely 1.5 meters high, spaces in which an adult person had to crawl in the darkness to clean and repair them. The work of building that system was colossal. Researchers estimate that thousands of slaves from sub-Saharan Africa were the ones who dug those tunnels over generations. What makes the fogaras even more impressive is their antiquity. The oldest fogara identified so far has been dated through organic matter preserved in its adobe lining to between the year 391 and 206 before Christ. That is to say, the Garamantes were building this underground hydraulic infrastructure centuries before the Christian era began. The technology of the fogara was not native to the Sahara. It arrived from Persia, where it is known as kanat and has been in use for 3,000 years. But the Garamantes adapted it to the unique conditions of their environment. In Persia, the aquifers are recharged by snowmelt from snowy mountains. In the Sahara, there are no snowy mountains. The aquifer the Garamantes exploited was what geologists call fossil water, water accumulated during the African humid period, between 7,000 and 5,000 years ago, when the Sahara was a green savanna with rivers, lakes, and abundant wildlife. Leave your like, subscribe, and share. Frank Schwartz, hydrogeologist at Ohio State University, described the Fezzan aquifer as a world-class aquifer. It was a reserve of water accumulated over thousands of years of rainfall that no longer existed, trapped in the sandstone rock of the highlands surrounding the Wadi al-Ajal. The natural flow of the underground water system carried that water toward the base of the hills, exactly where the Garamantes built their fogaras. It was a unique combination of favorable geology and advanced technical knowledge that allowed a civilization to arise in one of the driest places on the planet. Schwartz was clear on this point. They were the first society in history to grow in Africa without a river. In Egypt, they had the Nile. In Mesopotamia, they had the Tigris and the Euphrates. The Garamantes had none of that. They built it themselves. The water extracted by the fogaras allowed something that today seems completely implausible for that region: intensive agriculture. The Garamantes cultivated wheat, barley, figs, and grapes typical of the Mediterranean, along with African sorghum, pearl millet, and cotton. They had irrigated fields with surface canal systems that distributed water from the outlet of the fogaras to the plots. Analyses of sediments and botanical macro remains from the excavations show a varied and sophisticated diet, with evidence of storage of agricultural surpluses. It was not a subsistence economy. It was a surplus economy capable of sustaining a ruling class, an army, specialized craftsmen, and a long-distance commercial network. That commercial network is another of the aspects that satellites and archaeology have revealed in all its magnitude. The Garamantes were not an isolated people. They were the intermediaries of trans-Saharan trade. To the north, they traded with Rome, gold, ivory, exotic animals such as lions and leopards, slaves. To the south, they maintained contact with the peoples of sub-Saharan Africa. Their caravans crossed the Sahara in both directions. Archaeologists have found in their excavations Roman amphorae, Mediterranean glass, Roman imperial coins, and objects of sub-Saharan origin. It was a civilization connected to the known world of its era, not an isolated people in the desert. And all that commercial flow passed through cities that the satellites have just revealed to the world. The question that inevitably arises is, why did they disappear? The answer that scientists have reconstructed is an almost prophetic warning for the modern world. The fossil aquifer that fed the fogaras was not replenished. It was dead water, accumulated in a past geological era, that was not going to return. As the Garamantes drilled more tunnels and extracted more water to feed more people, the level of the aquifer dropped. The oldest fogaras stopped flowing. They had to dig deeper. Farther, in an impossible race against water depletion, researchers estimate that the system began to collapse around the year 500 of our era. The fall of the Roman Empire eliminated the northern market of trans-Saharan trade. Without trade and without water, the cities emptied. The sand covered them slowly until they disappeared. The historical irony is almost perfect. The same fossil aquifer that the Garamantes exhausted 1,500 years ago is being exploited today by Libya through the Great Man-Made River, the largest hydraulic engineering project in the world. Inaugurated in the 1980s under the Gaddafi regime, the Great Man-Made River pumps water from the same deep aquifer of the Libyan Sahara northward toward the cities of the Mediterranean coast to supply millions of people. Geologists warn of exactly the same thing that happened with the Garamantes. The aquifer is not replenished. It is a temporary solution on an industrial scale. The past and the present of the Sahara are, in this sense, a mirror. What the satellites detected in the Libyan Sahara was not just a collection of ruins, it was proof that our map of human history remains incomplete. That there are entire empires, networks of cities, sophisticated cultures buried in the deserts of the world, waiting for technology to be powerful enough to reveal them. The Garamantes went from being barbarian nomads in the history books to being pioneers of urbanization in the desert. The first African society to grow without a river, builders of the largest network of underground hydraulic engineering in the ancient world. All of that the satellites returned. All of that was there, beneath the sand, waiting for someone to look from above with the right eyes. Leave your like, subscribe, and share. Until next time.